This video shows how my son was framed. It started when 9 policemen showed up outside our door. It's important you know the layout of Shady Lane and see that it dead ends. Officers spread out to look for victims and witnesses. Officer Castillo found the victim, 16-year-old Holden. Holden stated that he was outside his residence and saw an unknown male walk by in front of his residence, northbound, naked. Holden also said that he saw the subject's penis and buttocks as he walked by. According to Officer Weingrad, Holden said he was in the parking lot area, which Shady Lane does not have. The area circled in red is the only place a group of cars could park. With all the police cars that day, it may have looked like a parking lot to Officer Weingrad. Residents would not call it a parking lot because it is so rare that anyone parks there. Holden said he had been walking in the driveway to the trailer court. Holden said he was focused on his cellular phone, and when he looked up from his cell phone, he saw a naked man within 6 feet of him. Holden said he could see Claire's penis, and Claire did not have any clothing on. Holden said Claire seemed zoned out, and Claire was wandering around the parking lot area. Holden said he left the area where Claire was and went home. Both of these statements cannot be true. To discover the truth, an explanation of why Peter was naked is needed. Mid-morning, a taxi driver pulled into Shady Lane and saw a naked man laying on the road. Across the road from the body were a shirt, pants, and a shoe. The taxi driver stopped to help the man. He called out to his fare and waved for him to come over. Ralph was waiting in his yard when he heard the driver. He looked over and saw a body laying on the road by the taxi. He couldn't tell who it was. Terrell was Ralph's dedicated taxi driver. When he wanted a taxi, Ralph would call Terrell's cell phone instead of the cab company. Ralph's alcoholism got him banned from calling Tucson cab companies. As I understand, Terrell was paid very well. When Ralph got closer, he saw it was Peter laying on the road. Seconds later, Peter stood up and began walking south. Ralph called out to Peter. Peter looked straight ahead and kept walking without saying a word. Debbie, the mail lady, pulled in and saw a naked Peter walking further down the road. She stopped in front of Peter's home. Terrell called 911 to get the unknown man help. He did not realize Ralph went to get the man's mother. I came out confused. Debbie said Peter was naked and pointed down the road. I didn't see him because he had gone past the road bend. Ralph said, "There are his clothes." And as I turned around to look, it hit me. Peter had a seizure. Seizures were not new to me. I was not present for these 2 public seizures. I have seen each phase of a seizure. Most people I've encountered, including police, think a seizure is only phase 2. As I ran to get the clothes, the taxi driver called out from his cab, "Are you going to help him?" I said, "Yes." He then said, "Do you need someone to come?" I said, "I don't need help. He had a seizure." Out of a box on the center of the taxi's dashboard, a woman said, "Are you sure you don't need help?" I said, "I don't need help. He had a seizure." I grabbed the clothes and shoe. I ran inside to put shoes on. I took the pants and ran out. I now saw Peter at the road bend walking towards me. The center of his face was brown. Debbie was standing at the mailboxes watching us. Ralph and Terrell had left. Later, Ralph told me Terrell had called 911 back to cancel his request for help. When I got closer, I saw the brown on his face was blood, dirt, and his nose was so swollen his face looked deformed. Looking straight ahead, he said he had to go for a walk. I got beside him, and as I bent down and placed the pant leg in front of his left foot, I said, "Lift your leg, we need to put on your pants." He lifted his left leg, and I slid the jogger pant leg on. He lifted his right leg. I started the pant leg, and Peter pulled on it back and forth until the shoe broke through. I put my arm around his waist, and as we walked, I edged him towards home. I set him on his bed. He said he had to go for a walk. I stood over him and kept saying, "You've had a seizure," until he came back to reality. Besides his nose, his left elbow and knee had mild bloody scrapes. Around 45 minutes later, I stepped out of my door and saw a lot of police cars and a lot of policemen with an unfriendly demeanor heading towards me. I knew instantly the 2014 fraudulent sex crime arrests had come back to haunt us. My insight was right. 9 policemen came to investigate a sex offense call that did not exist. My theory, Officer Weingrad looked up Peter's record. He saw the 2014 sex crime arrest and concluded if Peter was naked, it must be a sex crime. Officer Weingrad entered a state of confirmation bias. He then organized 8 other officers, and they all came to prove what they already concluded in their minds before they even got here. Now back to which officer's statement is true. Officer Castillo's statement aligns with what the others saw. It is true. From his yard, Holden saw a naked Peter walk by on the road going north. From the time Peter got up off the road to the time I got to him, someone was watching him as he walked down the road out of sight. There was no wandering in an area. Officer Weingrad's statement is not true. Neither of these statements contain the requirements for an indecent exposure charge, but this statement does. First, there was no Officer Holden at the scene, and Officer Castillo and Weingrad are the only 2 policemen who reported talking to Holden. Officer Weingrad wrote that a non-existent officer told him that Holden said he saw Peter's genitals, and Peter consciously intended for that to happen. That is not what Officer Castillo wrote, so we know that Officer Holden was not a typing error. This statement was made up, and that's the only statement in the report that warrants an indecent exposure charge. Peter was framed for the same sex crime charge he was framed for in 2014. Weingrad was emboldened to frame Peter because of Nanette Stone. Before I share what Nanette Stone told Castillo and Weingrad, it's important you know some things about her. This is Nanette's sister-in-law, Rochelle Stone. They are married to the Stone brothers. Nanette's family had lived at Shady Lane a few years earlier. They were evicted. On the day of Peter's seizure and arrest, Nanette's family had been staying in Rochelle's home for about a month. Rochelle was not home during Peter's seizure and arrest. When she got home, Nanette told her Peter had been streaking. Nanette was aware that Peter and Rochelle were friends. A week or 2 before Peter's seizure and arrest, CPS came to Rochelle's home and took Nanette's 9-year-old son. It was suspected Nanette was manipulating medication to cause him seizures. The Stone family discussed that Nanette appeared to enjoy the attention she got when her son had a seizure. Once he was taken out of her care, he never had another seizure. She will not get him back. Within a week after Peter's seizure and arrest, CPS took Holden and Alyssa. In October of 2022, Nanette's family was again evicted, but this time no Stone family member would allow Nanette to stay in their home. A sister of the Stone brothers believes her son is in prison because of what Nanette said in a letter she sent to his judge. Nanette was angry her daughter Alyssa was sentenced to prison, and he was set to get probation. I learned facts of Alyssa's appalling crime from online news. While I don't know if Nanette lied to put the man in prison, I know Nanette lied about Peter, so I know it's possible. After Officer Castillo got Holden's statement, I then had Holden call his mother, Miss Stone, out. Miss Stone said she did want the subject arrested. In addition, Miss Stone said that she and her daughter Alyssa, who is 14 years of age, were walking through the trailer complex and saw a naked man walking around in trailer number 4. They did not call the police. I then had all 3, Holden, Alyssa, and Miss Stone, walk towards trailer number 4. From a short distance, approximately 30 yards away, all 3 witnesses saw the subject we had detained and positively identified him. While we were standing there, Alyssa told me 2 weeks ago she and her mother were walking by the same trailer, and she saw the subject later identified as Peter. Alyssa said she saw his penis and buttocks as they were walking by. It is worth noting that Peter's trailer was next to the park manager's. The black arrow points to the gate where all park business was conducted, like paying rent. The bottom picture shows the view when standing at the gate. Besides business, residents would gather at the gate just to visit. Because of the high traffic, the awning was always down. On Weingrad's report, Nanette said something completely different. Nanette Stone told me approximately 2 weeks ago she and Alyssa had been walking home through the trailer court. Nanette Stone told me she and Alyssa saw Claire wandering naked around the trailer court. Nanette Stone said she did not know who Claire was or if he lives at this location, and did not call 911 to file a police report. Neither Nanette or Alyssa ever told Rochelle they saw Peter naked, because they never did. Nanette lied because she wanted the attention police give victims. Harm done to others doesn't mean anything to Nanette. Now from Weingrad's perspective, the investigation of the non-existent sex offense call. 2 weeks earlier, a woman and her 14-year-old daughter saw Peter wandering the trailer court naked. Just like he was wandering naked today when he purposely exposed his genitals to Holden. He was in the parking lot area where it's easy to hide behind cars and then jump out when a victim walks by. And in 2014, Peter exposed his genitals to a woman and her 2 young children. That evidence makes it crystal clear Peter is a flasher to children. So Officer Weingrad got very close to Peter's face and screamed as loud as he could, "Stop showing your penis to children!" Peter again said he was sorry for being naked and said he couldn't remember. Officer Weingrad shared the investigation results with his sergeant. And what did his sergeant recommend he do? Call the group that deals with sexual predators who target children. That group declined to get involved. Now back to reality. Neither Nanette, Alyssa, or Holden called the police. The taxi driver called to get Peter help, and then called back to cancel it. At my request, Ralph told me the next time Terrell was coming. I went out and asked Terrell if he'd give a video statement. He said yes, but he said he was in a hurry so he'd come back in 2 days. He said he did not know I was Peter's mother when he asked me if I was going to help him. He said when he pulled in, he saw him laying on the road, and he stopped to help him. Terrell gave me his card with his cell phone number on the back. I never saw or spoke to Terrell again. My calls and texts went unanswered. I don't blame him. Helping prove Peter was framed could cause him problems. It was okay. His 2 911 calls would be enough evidence. Before I read the taxi driver's statement in the report, there's something you need to know. Peter and I were still being detained when Ralph and Terrell returned. Terrell dropped Ralph off, and on his way out he was stopped across the road from Officer Hancock, Peter, and I. Weingrad talked with Terrell, and at one point Terrell leaned forward so he could see me. He stared a few seconds with a look of pure shock on his face. I'll always wonder what Weingrad was telling him. Terrell left, and about 5 minutes later, Weingrad came to tell us he was charging Peter. Peter went to the police car to sign the ticket. I went down to Rouse to ask what happened before he came to get me. I asked if the police talked to him. He said no. Weingrad came over with Peter to tell me the ticket was in his pocket. I told him Ralph had seen Peter laying on the road and asked why he didn't talk to him. Weingrad said they picked the witnesses they want to use. And they left. Now I'll read the taxi driver's statement on the report. I called the complainant, Art Shepard, who said he called 911 to report a naked male in the trailer park who tried to get into his taxi. Shepard said approximately an hour prior to my call to him, had been naked in the trailer court and was out of it. Shepard said this male lives in Unit 4, and the male was now dressed. The first thing I asked Terrell when I saw him that one time was if he went by the name Art Shepard. He said no, and he said he did not know an Art Shepard. Luckily, 51 days after the arrest, I got the disclosure, and this time the police report displayed Art Shepard's phone number, so I called it. Art Shepard and his wife had moved in next door 1 or 2 days before Peter's seizure and arrest. I saw the trailer, but had not seen them yet. Peter and Art had seen each other because Peter sat outside all the time. Art had seen Peter walk south when he was naked. He called 911 right away. Around 5 minutes later, Art saw me run by. Art saw me with my arm around and now dressed Peter's waist as we walked by his lot. Art was angry the police report lied about him. Art did call 911 to report a naked man, but no police called him or came to speak with him. He's not a taxi driver. Art called the Tucson Police Department to complain about being in the report, and what was he told? Take your complaint to court. In other words, we don't care. 9 policemen came with the intent to charge Peter with indecent exposure, not to find out what really happened. So Peter and I were never asked anything about the day. They just responded uninterested to the few things we said. In this video, I've already shared what happened from the moment Peter was found laying on the road. Now I will share how the morning started. It was a pick-up medication day, which there is a routine. He takes the bank card to Circle K, buys the current deal on Red Bull or Rockstar, and gets $20 cash to buy himself lunch later on. He brings the bank card back and then goes to the bus stop when it is time. One difference that day, he forgot his bus card and so ran back to get it. And that's when the seizure happened. Officer Hancock wrote a report. Peter did not say he drank 3 Red Bull at the bus stop. I said I saw 3 empty Red Bull cans on the floor by his bed. I said Peter has a history of seizures, and I said, this morning I think drinking too much caffeine in a short period of time triggered the seizure. Neither Peter or I said he was prone to seizures after drinking energy drinks. Peter thinks Red Bull has no bad side effects. And this is the only seizure I've seen that I think excess caffeine coupled with running back to get the bus pass triggered the seizure, and I could be wrong. I said something relevant, but since Officer Hancock was stuck in confirmation bias, to him nothing I said needed to be in the report, except for the 3 empty Red Bull cans, which he wrote Peter said. At one point while we were being detained, Weingrad came over and said 2 weeks ago a woman and her daughter saw Peter running around naked, just like he was doing today. Almost in unison, Peter and I said sternly, "That's a lie." Then Weingrad walked away. I told Peter and Officer Hancock that Rochelle was behind that lie. Rochelle and I had a friendship-ending disagreement a few months earlier. Rochelle and Peter remained friends. Rochelle was the only person who'd want to hurt me. I never thought she'd harm Peter, but at that moment I saw no other explanation for the lie. Had Weingrad called Rochelle, he would have learned that Rochelle and Peter were friends, that Nanette knew Peter, and that Nanette and Alyssa never told Rochelle they saw Peter naked. But since the only goal of the police was to charge Peter, what I said was useless to them. Neither Peter or I brought up his SMI. His SMI did not directly cause the seizure. Weingrad knew Peter was SMI. Years ago, an officer told me Peter was flagged as SMI, and Lot 4 was flagged as a home with an SMI person. In the report, what Weingrad wrote I said is not what I said. To me, the report was written to look like Peter and I were just making excuses. No one documented Peter's face injury. I took a picture that day, but when I looked at it 2 days later, it was too dark, so I took another picture. But the swelling went down. I wasn't worried. Body cam would show the extreme swelling of Peter's bloodied nose. Among other things, body cam would show the taxi across from us as Weingrad spoke to Terrell. The 911 calls would prove Terrell called to get Peter help, and then called back to cancel the request. I was confident. Just with the body cam, 911 calls, and discrepancies in the report, any public defender would be able to stop a prosecution. I would then file a complaint with Tucson Police. It is important I make something very clear. I've had a lot of contact with Tucson Police because of Peter's SMI. I've had a lot of observation of Tucson Police because of Shady Lane's high crime rate. Overall, I consider Tucson Police to be professional, respectful, and fair, and I am very grateful for how Peter and I have been treated. In fact, just before Peter and I moved out of the East Side substation area, I bought a giant box of See's candy and created a card with a cartoon of a man being arrested. I titled the card, "Thank you for arresting my son," even though they just transported him. The card thanked them for their help and kindness they showed both Peter and I, and informed them we were moving out of their area. As I handed the beautiful giant See's box and card to a policeman at the station, I said I just wanted to say thank you, and I walked away. Overall, I consider the West Side substation just as competent and respectful as the East Side, and I am just as grateful for all the help Peter and I got from the West Side Police Force. As for the 2 framings, when you are a shirtless man who stands on a busy street corner talking to yourself, with your property scattered around you, you lead a shunned and isolated life. Because of a brain malfunction, aka mental illness, you wouldn't be able to grasp you were framed. Officer Trevor saw an opportunity to improve his arrest statistics by framing Peter. He figured it wouldn't change Peter's life too much, since he's already shunned. Now the second framing. Their intent was honorable. They came to help the community. Sadly, they sought only what they wanted to see. Thanks to a disturbed woman and her children, to Tucson Police, Peter is a flasher to children. Being stuck in confirmation bias does not make a person a bad police officer. Peter never did this, yet with this arrest record, what community would welcome him? As I said before, I was confident any public defender would be able to stop a prosecution. I was naive. What happened in court was a shock to the conscious. I now know why police feel safe to brazenly frame a person. Ralph and Rochelle gave video statements. Terrell, I believe, got scared. Debbie, the mail lady, said she'd write a statement, but I never got one. She has since retired. Art refused to give a statement. Next is Ralph's statement, which he gave 48 days after the seizure and arrest. His mental decline due to alcoholism is clearly evident in the video, yet he is still a strong witness. After that, there's Rochelle's statement, the police report, the judicial complaint that explains the court railroading of Peter, and last, my video plea to Dr. Phil.